Hallo Laurie,
Hallo Chris, welkom.
dankie, dankie.
Het
Het
jy
jy al,
goed ger...
ek sien jy het al die vergadering begin record.
Nee, ek kan hom stop vir nou. Good evening, Chris, our special guest tonight. Good evening to all the participants. Also, participants who join us for the first time tonight. It's great to have you with us. We have from the Social Justice Foundation, we have Eileen and Charles Flandorp from head office with myself here tonight. Then we have from Dialogue for Action, we have Trader, we have Barend. Welcome, Trader and Barend. It's good to have you with us. Chris will later introduce some of the other participants across the world. Great to see you. Great to see Dr. Vernon Stern. I haven't seen him for quite a while. And all the others who are joining us tonight. It's so great to have you. I was privileged and I was introduced to a group of international participants and students here in the Western Cape by Chris Spies, and I had the opportunity to do one-day training on conflict transformation and peace building. Wow, what a wonderful experience that's been, Chris. Thank you for opening the doors in that way. I would like to introduce Chris to you tonight. First of all, he tells me he's a husband, a father, and a grandfather. He lives in Stellenbosch. His journey started many years ago. He's very much involved in peacemaking, and he's got a very long curriculum vitae. I won't be able to cover all of it. His experience in peace building stretches from 1982 until now, and he is still very much involved in peace building and accompanying young peace leaders in South Africa, Kenya, South Sudan, Liberia, and other countries, including Nepal, etc. He's also a facilitator of the Folk Bernadette Academy on courses including dialogue and mediation since 2006, and he's been contributing to the strengthening of UNDPA staff, and he will tell us more about that a little bit later. Qualification-wise, he has done a master's degree in theology in the 1980s. He worked as a pastor in community development, and during the time also on anti-apartheid matters in different rural communities in South Africa. He serves as a peace and development advisor for the UNDP in Guyana, and his service there was from 2003 to 2006. Since then, he has facilitated numerous retreats for the United Nations Peace and Development Advisors and Resident Coordinators. An absolute pleasure to have you with us tonight, Chris. I'm going to hand over, and please feel welcome, and also please feel free to ask some of the guests that you know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laurie. It's also been a huge pleasure to get to know you quite recently, actually, through Trader and Barend and others, and part of the Dialogue for Action in the Western Cape group. It's a real privilege to be with you guys tonight. I posted in the chat a little outline of how I think the evening could go. But first of all, I'd just like to add to what Laurie has been saying. I mean, he's been reading a lot of stuff about what I have done, but tonight is not about me. And I would like to make this quite clear up front. It's not about Chris tonight. I stand on the shoulders of many, many people. And some of you on this group have influenced me more than I could ever imagine. So please keep that focus for tonight, that what we are talking about are lessons that emerged through practice over the years. And all of us, I'm quite sure, if we think back about people that have really influenced us, we will be able to put a few people on top of our list. And I have a long list of people that have really impacted me. And one of them is Lawrence, who is also on this platform tonight, who I had the privilege of working with in Guyana as my colleague, and he was the program manager. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So, Lawrence, can I ask you to just briefly just say a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what's been happening in your peace building life so far?
Thanks, Chris. Well, not much to say really, and basically your protege. Well, you everything I have in terms of peace building. I'm from Guyana in South America. I have a background in theology like Chris, but I have also worked a bit with the United Nations and supported peace building processes in several countries as a consultant. But recently made a transition to forest governance and how do we work collaboratively with stakeholders to preserve this beautiful natural asset that certainly Guyana has in its forests, and how do we bring stakeholders together so that they can trust each other, build consensus, share information, grow together, dialogue. So yeah, a lot of positive things there. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, and thank you.
Thank you. I also see Joe. Joe, can you just briefly tell us about your where you are and what you've been doing?
Good evening, everyone. Hey, Chris and everyone. Joe Washington. I'm based in Bologna, Italy. My background is in teaching and training in human rights and conflict resolution. My most intense experience, peace building, has been working with an organization many, many years ago called UNPO, Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. And my most recent experience has been 10 years working for the UN peacekeeping mission, first in Sudan at the beginning, and then in South Sudan after it gained independence. And I'm delighted to be here. I've met Chris, heard about Chris, worked with Chris now with the Unyoke Foundation, and it's an honor and a privilege for me. So thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. We are quite a number of people on this group, so unfortunately we won't be able to touch base with everyone. I think my first desire was to start from a position of getting you to post questions as to what would you be interested in hearing tonight. And I think there is a space in the chat if there are questions coming up that you can just post it there, and I'll try and respond to it as good as I can. Yeah, as I said, I would love to share lessons that have emerged collectively with others, but ones that have particularly stuck with me and that have influenced my career so far. So I basically started off as a student at Stellenbosch University, and during the 1976 riots, I was guarding university buildings against the unruly crowds over in Ida's Valley and so on. And I just heard the gunshots and I heard the commotion, and I just realized that there was something terribly wrong. It was not my first realization, but I am a product of apartheid. I am a recovering racist. I grew up in a family that associated only with white people. And as a young kid, I believed that we were actually the chosen people. So the awakening to the fact that we're all human beings, and some human beings are crying out, and some human beings are sitting in powerful positions, that really impacted me a lot during the 1970s. And so it also was a question of what makes sense now. I mean, I'm studying theology. What has theology got to do with this thing of justice and apartheid and so on? So the point I would like to make is that my awakening, my movement from a purely privileged white Afrikaner boy to somebody who is deeply concerned and who just realized that there is a country out there that I didn't know anything about. That influenced eventually that choice that I made when, in our church tradition, we are called to a congregation. You couldn't pick a congregation. So I was called to a very affluent congregation in the Eastern Cape, a white congregation. And my parents and everybody was just very delighted. Somerset East, some of you may know where that is. And so everybody was delighted that I got this prestigious calling to this wonderful rural congregation. And 5 minutes later, my phone rang and I was called to a small congregation in the Eastern Cape, also in the Eastern Cape, but in a colored community. And the word colored is a very contested term, and I don't like using it, but for the sake of just delineating, it's a very small community. And there was absolutely no question that that would be my calling to go there. And Burgersdorp was my real university. I often credit many illiterate people, many young people who didn't get any opportunities in life to study as I did. They were my teachers, they were my professors. And so I'd like to tell a little story of the first 5 minutes that I was in town. Our stuff was being unpacked from the furniture removal truck. And as we were carrying our stuff into this house, a big house that belonged to the white church, but it was also in the white part of town, but they made it available, as they called it, for the missionary in the NG Zendenkerk, as they called it then, the Dutch Reformed Mission Church. A car stopped and an elderly gentleman came out and introduced himself as the chairperson of the commission that looks after properties of the church. And so he asked me whether I was the new missionary in town. And I said, no, I'm not the new missionary. I am actually the pastor of this congregation. And he was quite taken aback. And he said to me, I just came to find out where you will where your study room will be, the place where you will receive your congregants. And I said, right here at my front door, uncle. And he said to me, no, it doesn't work like this. It's got to be at the back door so that the colored people don't have to come into your front door. And I'm telling this story because I've often reflected on the fact that I wasn't looking for conflict. I found conflict when I came there. And there was a line in the sand, a line that was drawn by people in power who said, in this town, you will operate like this. And if you don't operate like this, you will be in trouble. And I was in trouble for 10 years from that moment on. So there was just no way I could say, okay, I'll think about it. It was a line in the sand where you had to take a stand for justice. So the first point that I'd like to raise was that I wasn't entering into a career of peace building thinking that this is what I'd like to do. In fact, quite late, after about 9-10 years, I discovered that there was something like a theory and a science of conflict resolution. So for 10 years, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how my life evolved after the Burgersdorp experience. Obviously, the uncle turned around and I was the communist in town. And for 10 years, we were haunted by security police, by the powerful people. And in fact, last year I got a wake-up call. I visited Burgersdorp again. And one of my friends who was in the congregation, he told me that a security police officer confessed to him that there was an informant of the security police on our church council. And this guy acted on instructions to lure me out of the house. And the street where I lived run perpendicular to a hill, and on that hill, that security police person was stationed with a sharpshooter gun, and the instructions was that they would take me out. And for some reason, I just didn't emerge from the house. I'm just telling this to say that that I found myself in conflict, and I found myself with this desire to build peace and to bring understanding and to build the bridges between people who think that they know one another and they didn't. And I was struggling with this question: how do you build peace when you are seen as the enemy? How do you build trust when people on the one side don't trust you and on the other side people embrace you? Like during the states of emergency, when the townships were burning, and it was just a horrible time of our country, 1985, 86, 87, those years. I was free to go into any township and I could mingle and I could attend meetings, but the rest couldn't. The rest of the white people couldn't. And so I was blamed for the fact that people trusted me on the one side, so I must be part of this communist onslaught on the country. So why do people trust you, but they don't trust us? Completely oblivious to the fact that their separation from people in this country dehumanized themselves so much that they couldn't even reach out to find common ground with people from the townships. So then it led to an existential crisis. We had 3 little kids. Anna Marie, my wife, at that stage was struggling very much in terms of social isolation. White people shunned us, and they didn't want to associate with us because they were afraid that they would meet people of color in our house. So bad it was. And so the question was, where to from now? I was fortunate then to receive a scholarship from the Kellogg Foundation International Leadership Program, and I joined the program for 3 years with other people from 30 different countries. And part of that fellowship was they gave me, I think it was about $2,000 that I could use to do whatever I wanted. So I used those $2,000 to find out, what is this thing about conflict resolution? And here I'd like to just talk a little bit about terminology as well. And I'm talking to the converted here. I'm seeing you all, and I know that you know a lot more than I do. But there was this, in the 80s, we began to think about conflict resolution. But then the assumption is that conflict can be resolved, which is not always the case. And some people talked about conflict management. Some people talked about arbitration and mediation. And then the term conflict transformation emerged. It was coined by a friend of mine who is now the patron of Unyoke Foundation. His name is John Paul Ledrock. He wrote this little book of conflict transformation. I think, Laurie, you have that book. And the basic premise is that conflict happens in relationships, and conflict is not bad. And because conflict happens in relationships, conflict can be transformed because relationships can be transformed. People can learn to work through differences. And so hence conflict transformation became the big focus. And I just realized that the time in Guyana, the time in Burgersdorp was coming to an end. The country was burning. Mandela was released in 1990. The peace accord was signed in 1991. 1991 was my last year in Burgersdorp, and I just realized that everybody was calling for mediation in the country. Help us. Then the church, where are the religious leaders? Bishop Tutu stepped in to help facilitate the National Peace Accord, signing of the National Peace Accord. And so I left ministry, went to Lavender Hill in the Cape for a year, and then I got the job as the secretary of the Western Cape Regional Peace Committee, which was a fantastic opportunity to help our country move through the transition towards the 1994 elections. And it was a very vibrant time in our country's history. I mean, I was at that stage, I was 38 years old. And this young bloke from the rural areas suddenly became a facilitator of meetings between government ministers and communities. We set up peace committees all across the Western Cape. It was a fantastic time when people stepped forward and said, we have to make this country work. So I learned the trade by actually doing it all the time, morning, noon, and night. And I'm just going to go quicker now, just give a brief overview of what happened after that. So one of the first acts of Parliament was to dissolve the peace accord structures, and we were all fired. We had no job. And a colleague of mine, Andries Oorendal, and we sent a proposal to the Center for Conflict Resolution, and we wanted to work on this idea of, can we prepare teams of people to step in communities where conflict arises? And is it possible for people to be prepared enough to come together across differences, across political divides, across gender divides, across capacity divides? Can they come together to help stabilize the communities? But as it happened, just after 1994, the country went through a very stable phase, and most violent conflicts stopped, and the focus was on building the government. So there weren't any further follow-ups in terms of that model that we were working with, but we learned very valuable lessons. Eventually, I then started working on land mediation and learned some very valuable lessons. I was a member of the National Land Reform Mediation Panel, and I was privileged to facilitate land claims, to mediate land claims in the Kalahari and in Jan Kempdorp area and so on. And what was very interesting of that phase, and that I learned so many valuable lessons about working with politicians. We've initially had a good runway, so to speak, on the Kalahari land claim, where the original people from the Kalahari, they were called Bushmen at that stage. They are Komani San people, where they claimed back land that they were dispossessed of. And we worked for about 18 months before we called the first meeting. This is also a very important lesson that I'll come back to you later. And don't bring people in a joint meeting too soon. I think we often make the mistake that if there's a conflict, we bring all the stakeholders, we put them in a room, and then chaos breaks out. So we decided to take a different route. We spent lots of time on one-on-one meetings because land is an emotional issue. And eventually the claim was resolved, but also a very painful lesson that the government actually completely pushed us into a corner. It's one of my big mistakes that I made as a mediator. I was called by the Minister of Land Affairs, then way back then, Derek Hanekom, and he said he wanted an agreement just before President Mbeki would be inaugurated as the second president of the democratic South Africa. And I went to the Commissioner of Land Affairs now, and we agreed. And I said to him, listen, we can conclude this deal on the land, but then this whole thing will collapse because there are no support structures for this deal. Not a single government department was actually actively involved in supporting the San community to manage that land when they get it. And we agreed with the commissioner that we would take that message to the minister. And when we walked into his office, he said, is there any reason why we can't have an agreement by this weekend? And the commissioner said, no, minister, we can do it. And I was thrown to the wolves. I should have just walked out and said, okay, it's not I can't professionally, I can't allow a deal to be signed where you sign a piece of paper and you have all the world's cameras there taking pictures of semi-naked Khoisan running on the dunes. Everybody celebrating, we've got the land back. And as it happened, the land collapsed. And the community was struggling a lot after that. So then I was plucked by the scruff of my neck to come to Guyana. And it was May 2003. I was called by the UN headquarters to say, we're looking for somebody to come to Guyana and work as a peace and development advisor. And I went there in May for a scoping visit, and I met Lawrence, and they eventually decided that they wanted me to come to Guyana. And it was just a great time from September 2003 to 2006. And the main focus of our joint program with a multi-agency task team of the United Nations was to see whether we could support Guyana's people to work towards peaceful elections. The country had a history of 50 years of election violence cycles. And so there I learned the very valuable lesson of taking the lead from the Guyanese. I mean, there's such a huge, I think, a mistake that is being made in the peace building world, where they fly in consultants and these guys draw up reports and they deliver the reports, and then peace is projectized, and you have a budget for 1 year or 2 years, and then it's done. Here it was different. Here we had Lawrence as the manager. I see Rolinda is also on the call. Welcome, Rolinda. Rolinda was one of our star facilitators. So the Guyanese were in charge of what needed to happen, and we supported them doing that for 3 years. And when the elections came in 2006, it was largely peaceful. I think it was a success. Although we, as the UN, I think we got blamed that we had tricked, especially Guyanese from African descent. We pacified them, and I'm not going to go into all of the reasons. If you are interested, we can have a conversation afterwards. But very valuable lessons around what it means to to mobilize people to talk about the difficult stuff that needed to be talked about. And we co-designed with the Ethnic Relations Commission and the steering committee comprising of political parties and women, youth, trade unions, business community. We co-designed a process where there were 143, I think, 143 dialogues across the country over a period of 3 months. The whole idea is get the people to talk about the stuff that they wanted to talk about. Get all the information in one place so that the country could see what were people talking about. And what was brilliant about that initiative is that people like Rolinda and Kala and Lawrence was leading this, that all the dialogues were facilitated by a mixed group of Guyanese from African descent, from Indian descent, and from, when it was possible, also from Amerindian descent. Because the whole idea was that Guyanese need to talk about stuff that Guyanese feel important. Let me also make one comment on what we did there, I think, which was very, very helpful. Often when you get to dialogues, people talk about what's wrong. People want to talk about the past. People want to blame. And in these dialogues, we started off by asking 6 basic questions. The one is, what makes you proud to be a Guyanese? The second thing is, what are you... Lawrence, you must help me now. I tend to forget a few things. What makes you proud to be a Guyanese? What is it that we need to talk about that we are not currently talking about? Who would you like to assist you in doing that? And what can we do for ourselves? Yeah, what can we do for ourselves? What do we want others to do for us, like the government? And what is it that we can't do anything about, but we would like to see some action? And that was so wonderful to see Guyanese talking about these issues over a period of time. But in the lead up to that, we had a group of about 26, 27 people that called themselves the Spirit of Guyana. And we did a couple of training courses on dialogue and mediation. And that's where the Spirit of Guyana people came in to assist us with that. So when Guyana was done, typically the UN moved on to a different focus, and the program basically collapsed. Lawrence's contract wasn't renewed, and again I was without any. I didn't have a job. So in short, I then started working as an independent practitioner, and Laurie gave the background of places where I've worked up till that point. So let me just stop there for a brief moment. I've been talking for quite some time, and I just wanted to check with you, are there any questions of clarity at the moment, or anything that triggered you that you just wanted to note down that we need to come back to later? Right. Yeah, so I'm not going to go into everything that we did since then. I just want to come back to the issue of context, language, and terminology. We spoke about conflict transformation. I just want to mention that one major discovery and lesson that stayed with me is the fact that often people when people talk about dialogue, and I see myself as a dialogue practitioner more than a mediator, when people talk about dialogue, then often in the world out there, dialogue is something that you do after everything else has failed. So people would call for dialogue between Putin and Zelensky, or if there is a violent conflict around natural resources or conflict, then people say, why don't you dialogue? And I think it's important for us, for me, to just make this point that dialogue is the backbone of all the conflict transformation initiatives that we can have, from direct conversations to mediation to litigation to even to war, which is also a form of conflict resolution, by the way. Dialogue is always necessary and is always needed, which doesn't mean that dialogue always works. And it's not to say that dialogue is always appropriate, but dialogue is always the backbone. If we don't talk, then what basis is there for any progress? And I understand dialogue not only as talking. Dialogue for me is a process of genuine interaction, a voluntary process of genuine interaction, through which human beings listen to each other deeply enough to be changed by what they learn. Just want to repeat this because I think this is very important. Dialogue is a voluntary interaction in safe and uncomfortable spaces through which human beings learn, listen to each other deeply enough to be changed by what they learn. Let me use an example here. The very first workshop that we did in Guyana was with religious leaders, if I remember correctly. There were people from the Hindu faith, Christians, Muslim, Baha'i. Yeah, I think those were the religious. And the very first session, when I asked them to put on their attire, their traditional dress as religious leaders. So the pastors came with their collars, and the Muslim guy came with his stuff, and the Hindu pandit came with his clothing. And so we sat in a circle, and the question was, what do you want others to understand about who you are and what is important to you? That was the very, very first workshop that we did. So what that did was it illustrated the value of telling our story without judgment, listening to each other deeply enough to be changed by what you learn, without interruption, without judgment. And the kind of questions that people asked were very interesting. And that illustrated to me the importance of not shying away from the difficult stuff. For example, the Christian pastor, or some of the Christians would ask the Hindu pandit, why do you guys believe in so many gods? There's only one God. Or they would ask the Muslim, so why do you oppress women? It's all very loaded assumptions that people are making, but they had a safe space where they could unpack the stuff. And then they would ask the Christians, why are you guys so arrogant? You say that Jesus Christ is the only way that you can get saved. You mean all of the rest of us go to hell? It's difficult, deep questions. What if we don't create those spaces where people can address these questions? Where else can they do that? So what is left then is for people to just get to each other's throat and make the assumptions and have a verbal brawl, so to speak. So the importance of dialogue, I cannot underemphasize. And to be able to facilitate dialogue takes a lot of practice, I think, but it's also just common sense. It is common sense because we are human beings, and we are human beings because we have got stories to tell. And what violence does, and destructive conflict, is that it it breaks our story. It forces us to tell a different story. A story that we didn't want to tell, a story of loss, a story of pain. So where do we have that space where we can actually work through those stories and tell a new story about what can happen if these conflicts are resolved? So it's not rocket science. It just requires us to realize that we are all just human beings. Regardless of where we are, regardless of what rank we are, regardless of how we are, how well educated we are just human beings. And for me, it is just so important to realize that much of our work on conflict transformation has got to do with the rehumanization of others. Because violent conflict and destructive conflict dehumanizes people. It makes them feel less like, it makes them feel they are not worth it. And then when people think they are not worth it, they stand up and they fight. Like Dominic Muisi wrote in his book about the geopolitics of emotion, where he basically makes the point that there are three emotions that are driving world politics. It is humiliation, and it is hope. And it is, let me think, hope, humiliation, and I'll come to the third one in a while. But he makes the point that if you look at, oh yeah, and the other one is fear. Sorry, the other one is fear. He uses the point that it was before the conflict that broke out between Russia and the Ukraine, for example. He said, if you look at Russia, if you look at the Muslim world, you see how humiliation is shaping their politics. Russia has lost the Soviet Union. They broke up. They were made to be the fall guys of the world, and their politics show how they take revenge on that. If you want to have examples of fear, you look at the West and Europe. I mean, this guy of the European Union said the other day, European Union is like a garden, and we need to build a fence around this garden to prevent the weeds from invading our garden. It's the language of fear. It's a language of keep people out. Don't include people. Don't humanize people. They are enemies that need to be kept out. And he says, if you want to look at hope, at that stage, it was about 10, 15 years ago when he wrote the book, you look at places like India and like Singapore and Malaysia, where things are not perfect, but they're looking up. Poverty is being diminished. It's getting lower, and people have hope that things can go better. And because they have hope, they also act in a way that inspire hope. And he puts the challenge forward that eventually our role in this world is to be ambassadors of hope. To tell people there is a different world possible. And our role is to eliminate humiliation and making enemies of others. And our role is not to live in fear. So for me, one of the big lessons that I've learned, and it may sound like I was very brave, but I wasn't. I was scared to death. Was that sometimes you just have got to have the courage to stand up and do something, regardless of what the consequences would be. If you believe this is the right thing, and you allow fear to dominate your actions, then you're in trouble. My Burgersdorp years in 1980s were like that. We were fearing for our lives at many times. I see my daughter Magdalene is also on the call. We just spent a month with them in Hungary. But when she was a little girl, I remember one day there was we suspected that there was an assassin hiding behind a bush along the main road leading into Burgersdorp, and we were developing a community food garden. And I was afraid that I would be taken out. So I did this irresponsible thing of carrying Magdalene in my arms, because I thought, surely they wouldn't shoot a little girl. So if they shoot me, they will probably take me out when I don't have my little girl with me. So just a point of having courage and not allowing fear to dominate what you need to do. During the peace accord days, there were times when it was really, really dangerous. I mean, you would go at night to a place like Toosrivier, for example. There's one bridge leading from the white community into the black community, and it was and they were blocking that bridge. There was no way we could talk unless you could walk across that bridge. And so the lights of the car on the other side of the bridge, I was walking in against the light. I couldn't see a thing. It was blinding me, and I was hearing the stones flying past my head. But I knew if I did not reach the other side, there was no way I could talk to the people who were angry on the other side. And so we were able to diffuse that situation. Now, just a word of caution here. It sounds like I'm painting myself as a hero, not at all. I think the time is over for the parachuted heroes to come and solve the problems of other people. Sometimes you just need an outsider to say, I'm here, I can walk with you. John Paul tells the story of during the Civil War in Nepal, for example. There was a Maoist rebel hiding in the mountains, and they were creating havoc. And the Civil War was really rough. And so they knew they needed this guy at the table. And so they sent an envoy to go to him to ask him to come to the negotiation table. And he said, no, I can't do that, because if they see me, they will kill me. And then this peacebuilder said to the guy, I will walk with you. If they kill you, they kill me as well. I can't guarantee that we'll be safe, but if we walk together, who knows what will happen. That's the one example that stayed with me. The other example was of in Northern Ireland in 1989. I visited John Lampen and Diana Lampen, Quaker peacebuilders in Londonderry. I think it's now called Derry. And we went for a walk, and John Lampen said to me, do you see that blue door on your left? Don't look quickly. Just observe there's a blue door on your left. And I cast my eyes and I saw the blue door. I said, yes. He said, the bomb expert of the IRA lives there. I said, how do you know? He said, I knew that. I said, have you met him? I said, yes. He said, I realized I had to talk to the guy, but I knew he could just blow my head off. And so I went and I knocked on the door. And this is the big thing of us as peacebuilders. If you don't knock at the door, you don't know whether the door will open or not. What? This thing of waiting till a conflict is ripe, I don't believe in it.
Chris.
I beg your pardon?
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't believe in waiting till a conflict is ripe. Just go and knock on the door. And the quality of your knock will determine how wide that door is open. The quality of your presence with somebody will determine the level of trust that you can build with that person. That leads me to another lesson that I've learned. You can expect to be a punching bag, and don't take it personal. There were many cases where I was abused in processes, especially during the peace committee days, and where people who you did not expect, you thought you had walked away with them, they would abuse you in the process and swear at you and what's the word? They would insult you. And so I broke 14. I went up to this guy and I said, "What's the matter? I thought we had a good relationship." He says, "Don't worry." He says, "I just punching you in front so that the other guys can get scared of me." So being a punching bag, being afraid, being courageous, being just out there knocking on the doors, that's how my life has been. And you've got no guarantee that you will succeed in the end, but what I can guarantee you is that you will get nowhere if you don't do it. And you just sit on the sidelines, you watch the whole world just fold under you. Guys, I've gone way beyond what I wanted to share. I still wanted to talk about some basic skill stuff, some value stuff, and some of the things I found useful in facilitation and dialogue and mediation. But I think you're welcome to contact me afterwards and we can go deeper on some of these issues. So let me just break there for the time being and get some, see whether there are any reflections. And then later on, I will tell you a little bit about what we are currently doing in terms of accompaniment of people who are working in peace processes.
Thank you so much, Chris. Very valuable. You are welcome to include some of your guests from other parts of the world also, as those people who have worked with you, but we are in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. I would love for Kala, Joe, I see James is also here. Zola, is that you? Zola Makosana? I haven't seen her for a long time. So please jump in. If there's anything that you have picked up from the time that we worked together and you would like to share it, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, okay. Hi, Chris. Yes, I'm here. Very interesting. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you and hear from, the wealth of experience that you have accumulated. Thank you.
Happy to see you as well, Zola. Zola and I work together on diversity training workshops for a huge construction company in the 90s, late 90s.
Chris, maybe I have a few questions. It's fascinating. Thanks. It's wonderful to hear about your experiences. Just one. How did you handle language? Because language is such an important part in dialogue. Did you work through interpreters, or did you try to find a common language? In South Africa at the moment, everyone's trying to make English a common language, but very often people can't express themselves. And I was thinking, especially when it goes that deeply, it would be interesting to see how you handled multilingual groups. Similarly, I think I love the way that you said that one respects the other people's cultures, and you actually build the dialogue by learning to understand the cultural differences and learning to respect them. Then maybe just another question. Did you have some specific ground rules that helped you to establish the kind of dialogue that you had? Just a few thoughts.
Thank you, Trader. Yeah, good questions. Obviously, let me be facetious. I just speak Afrikaans and then everybody understands it. No, not at all. No, it's so important that you work through translation. In many cases, like in Myanmar, for example, we had professional translators working alongside us. And in Nepal, some of the program staff who do the mediation training in Nepal, they were translating in Nepali. Around the ground rules, it is, I don't call them ground rules, I call them a group commitments. And the group commitments are developed by the groups. But I have a few things that I put on the list that if they are not raised, that I would put there. The one, for example, is that the participants are in charge of the content. And as a facilitator, I'm in charge of the process. But the process has to serve the people who are in the meeting. So I also give an invitation to people that if the process doesn't work, just stop it. And also on the issue of trust, I often begin sessions by saying, you have no reason to trust me because you haven't worked with me. So mistrust is actually a good thing. Check me out. If it doesn't work for you, then let's pick somebody else. And I often find that that opens up the door. People see somebody who is not there to dominate, but people is there to actually walk alongside. I think often we make the mistake of these powerful facilitators who act like showmen or showwomen, who hog the stage and who are the big shots in the room. And the facilitator is, if the facilitator becomes too visible, too powerful, it doesn't serve the process. It's actually, in the end, people should be saying, oh hell, how did this happen? We did it ourselves. And the facilitator can actually disappear in the background. The other golden rule, of course, is respect. Respect for the space, which is very important. I'd love to talk about space if you are interested in doing that. Respect for the space, respect for the process, and the respect for the facilitation team. And I don't think it's a good idea to just be a single facilitator, even in mediation. I think it's a mistake to have just one mediator. It's often a good idea to be a team of mediators, co-mediators with whom you can work. We did it a lot during the Peace Accord days. And also a very diverse mediation team in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of experience as well. And then the other golden rule, of course, if you talk about respect, is that it is about listening. Listening without judgment. Like Stephen Covey said that so beautiful, you listen with a view to understand. And I've often seen so many times that people listen to satisfy their own curiosity. And by actually focusing on what you want to hear, you are actually steering the story in a different direction. It's not the story that people want to tell, but because you want to hear certain stuff, you steer the story in that direction. So it's listening without judgment, without domination, and listening without, listening with full attention. I often think that the litmus test of a good conversation is, at the end of that conversation, somebody would say, wow, I really, really feel that person to whom I told my story understands where I'm coming from. That's all. That's enough. You don't need to convert the person into your point of view. You don't need to steer the person in a direction. Often people just want their stories to be heard without judgment. So we can go on for a long time around this, Trader. But let me just say something about space and two examples that I want to use. I think it's so important that where we meet, people should recognize that space as part of their culture. We're in Fiji. we're having a dialogue sessions between people from Fiji, Vanuatu, Tonga, Samoa, and Papua New Guinea. And my co-facilitator is Koila Olsen from Fiji. And Koila said, this hall, we're in a hotel, this hall should look like Pacific Islander space. So we got carpets that they weaved. We've got cloths, fabric on the walls. People don't sit on chairs, so we've got these mats on which people sat. We've got flowers in the room. And so when all these high-level people walked into the room, there were no tables. We sat in circles. They said, this is our space. And it went brilliantly. So in the spaces that we're using in Yoke Foundation, also in our retreats, in the middle there's a centerpiece with a couple of talking sticks. And talking sticks are fantastic. You have a few objects that people can identify with. And you don't have to facilitate in a very rigid way by saying, now you talk and now you talk. No, if somebody wants to talk, they go and pick up a talking stick and everybody in the room sees who's going to talk next. And people, the one who's got the talking stick is the one who has the floor. So there's no need for application of ground rules and all that stuff. So space is extremely important, and space is not only what it looks like, it's not only the talking sticks, but it's the let me say that again, it's the quality of presence that we have with one another. It's that dimension, that this space where we are here is almost like a sacred space. Here we have the difficult conversations, we do it respectfully, we do it in a way that builds people up. We do it in a way that will change people from being adversaries or people who have anxieties into people who say, wow, this is what we needed at this stage. I forgot your second question, Trader. You had the 3 questions, but I hope I answered it more or less. Okay. I didn't
particularly value what you said about space, because I think that it taps into the emotional thing that most people don't realize how important it is.
Yeah.
Feeling at home and safe.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Rian asks the question, Rolanda, what is the spirit of Guyana? Could you please reply to that?
Yeah, sure. Chris, it's wonderful being here. I think just before I answer the question in terms of the spirit of Guyana, I think in terms of reflecting on your time in Guyana and the impact that those trainings had to do with I think there was a deficiency in how people actually engaged. And so the process design for facilitation or for meetings was invaluable. And to this day, I think that is the thing that Carla and I really work to impart and to have as a part of our work, just sort of considering what are the processes that we need to have to help persons to really engage, right? So that's my reflection. In terms of what is the spirit of Guyana, when Chris was speaking about some of the questions that he asked at the beginning of that session with the religious leaders, one of the questions that I found, I think everyone felt was really impactful was, where are you and what are you doing when you feel the spirit of Guyana? And it was interesting because of how diverse the participants were. As they spoke about where they are, some persons, I remember one person saying, and this is 20 years ago, and it's still with me, but there was one person who said, I'm under a house and I'm in a hammock and I'm eating, out of a plate with my hands, and that is how I feel the spirit of Guyana. And so many people could relate to each other's experience. And that became the thread that I think held participants through the difficult moments, because they could all identify with that spirit of Guyana. So at the end of the training, when we wanted to continue working together to build our facilitation skills, we thought, what better name to use than the Spirit of Guyana movement? And so, we did a number of initiatives during the election period that would help the country to sort of identify with the spirit of Guyana. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Carla.
I can just quickly jump in and thank you, Chris, for the tremendous sharing. It's always a gift to hear you sharing about your stories in terms of the knowledge, skills, and experience that you've accumulated over the years. So I'm grateful to be here. I always find it particularly useful, and you talked about this in terms of there's all this emphasis on best practices, but I think often as much, if not more, can be learned from the worst practices in terms of, okay, we can't tell you what to do, but we can suggest things you want to stay away from. And so I appreciated you sharing the story about settling the land claim and how that wasn't necessarily the right move. So if in time remaining, if you can share any additional worst practices that you think has particular resonance, that would be useful. And then the second question is in terms of accompaniment. And my sense has been that people have different ideas, different definitions of if you don't mind sharing it in terms of what it means when you talk about it, what are those key elements of accompaniment for you?
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to pay tribute to James Taylor, who is on this group. He's on the left-hand corner of my screen. James has been a colleague and a dear friend since the 1980s, and in the 1980s already, or 1990s, CDRA, Community Development Resources Association, of which he was a part, wrote a book around praktijkbegeleiding, which means accompaniment in practice. And that was invaluable. And for many, many years, that has been my guiding as well as to what accompaniment means. But maybe I can ask James, are you still there? Could you just maybe briefly tell us how you guys came on the issue of accompaniment, and then I'll take it from there to talk about what we're currently doing on accompaniment.
Chris, I'm here. I'm just moving. You caught me. I was sitting in the kitchen with my family. But I'll switch my camera on in a second. Accompaniment really grew out of a long process of working as colleagues in organizations in which there had been a practice of supervision and of superiors, monitoring and guiding the practice of others. And we were really looking for alternatives to that. And we had experimented with a variety of different ways of collegial support. And eventually, just to keep it very short, we used the metaphor of the accompanist, the musical accompanist of a singer. And we felt it reflected something of what we were trying to achieve, where the one accompanying the performer has a vital role to play. They are not in the limelight. It's not their show. It is the show of the one being accompanied. And the ability of the accompanier depends very highly on their ability to listen and appreciate the practice of the one who they are trying to, raise their game and improve their performance from the background and through listening and walking alongside the practice of the key performer. So that's kind of our origins of the concept of, rather than this hierarchical, all-knowing supervisor of activity, rather to walk alongside and bring your experience into relationship with the key performer. So that's a bit of background.
And we have the privilege of having James accompany us as on the Oak Foundation, and he's been accompanying me as well. And what he does so brilliantly is he's just a consistent factor in listening, hearing, bringing a perspective from outside. I've seen this before. Do you realize this is happening? And it's so empowering to have James around, helping us as a new organization grow in the field. So I'd like to recommend not only James, but all of us. I mean, I'll talk a little later about how it came about that we started on Yoke Foundation. It was because we all realized that as peace builders, we need support. We need people out there to just help us think through stuff and not from a point of teaching us. Not like they Nepal, I've got to struggle so much because everybody calls me a guru Chris, and I said, no, yeah, but you are the international expert. I said, no, but if you get with me on this plane back to South Africa and you come into my context, I will refer to you as the international expert. So stop this nonsense. We are just human beings walking alongside each other. So our understanding, Joe and the rest of the colleagues of accompaniments, we tested this with the South Sudanese that we're working with, and we asked them, how do you understand accompaniment? And I think they came up with a beautiful metaphor. They said sometimes if we walk at night, we're a bit scared. And then if we ask somebody, can you walk with me till I feel safe enough to continue the journey? And I found this to be a very helpful metaphor alongside the one of accompanist of a singer, like you say, James. We are there through phone calls, through visits, through messages, through retreats, through providing support in terms of just ordinary personal stuff like loss in the family, sickness, whatever. Just to make sure and so the people that we're working with can feel we are not alone. Somebody thinks we matter, and somebody thinks we matter enough that we can actually invest in them and spend some time with them. So we have been accompanying 36 young South Sudanese since 2016-17. Through retreats, we exposed them to other contexts like Nepal, Ghana the other day, South Africa. And our concept of accompaniment, it's not a short-term thing. I think that's often also a big mistake that we are making, that we think that peace building is short-term projectized stuff. We commit for 10 years, at least 10 years, a decade thinking, decade support. Because over the longer term, people can grow in confidence and can know I will not abandon you. I will not walk away tomorrow because there's no budget. If we form a relationship, if we do build a network, we're in it for the long haul. So that's how we try and do that. Joe, mistakes. Are we going to stay till 11 o'clock tonight or what?
Chris, if I can maybe ask you, we have dialogue experts on the panel tonight. We have mediators in different fields. Labor, family, civil, commercial, etc. If they want to get involved in peace building, maybe you can just share around that.
It's a broad question, Laurie. It depends on at what level and what, I mean, and is it community peace building? Is it on national level? Is it what kind of peace building are we talking about? And I would really appreciate the colleagues that I don't know on this platform. Please also share your questions and what you see are possibilities. And if you can elaborate on Laurie's question, it would be really helpful.
I think initially, maybe just on a national level, community level to start off with, how to and where to.
There are people who are much more qualified than I am to talk about this. I think about Barend, who is just for me the ultimate guy who doesn't make too many excuses. He just gets his hands dirty and reaches out and do his work. So I would short answer to your question, Laurie, is that build relationships where you are. Especially with people that you don't agree with. Socialize with people that you don't normally socialize with. Especially when somebody irritates you. Nobody can say no to an ice cream or a coffee. Give you an example, and it links to Joe's question about mistakes. Laurie, Barend, and a couple of others, we tried to intervene the other day in a process. Charles as well, Charles Flandel. We tried to, we tried to intervene in a convocation conflict at Stellenbosch, and so we put our heads together. I made some big mistakes there because I thought if we have a team of people instead of one or two, we could actually talk to both sides of this conflict that was really getting to a point. And nobody was willing to talk, and the thing blew up, basically. And we got flack for being old people who try to teach the younger people stuff. I think it's valuable lessons. But then one of the young activist women, a student, very, very bright law student, who was so hectic in her criticism of us. I called her and I said to her, can we have a coffee? And she said yes, and we had a brilliant conversation. She had all kinds of ideas about us and about our motives. She didn't know us, we didn't know her. We had a 1.5 hour coffee conversation, and at the end she said to me, I leave this conversation with a very, very different view of what you try to achieve and who you are. Had I not done that, then the perception would have just continued, and there's no room for actually transformation. I got transformed in that process as well, and she got transformed in that process as well. So that would be my basic thrust, Laurie. Don't shy away from the difficult conversations and reach out. Just build the networks, talk to people, but don't do it from the point of how can we help you. It's a big mistake that we often make, especially we as privileged people. We often ask the questions, how can we help? But we seldom ask the question, what can we learn from you? That's a very different question. And if you ask the person, what can I learn from you? That person reaches out and begins to tell their story and their stories and their fears. And then you can meet as human beings. At national level, I don't know, our country is in a mess on so many levels. I think I would refer to, I would ask Baron to maybe talk about this more, but maybe start local and make sure that as we build up towards elections, that it's not only the doom and gloom messages that are reaching the media and that's not all that's been spoken about. What we try to do with the South Sudanese as well, you build groups of people who are a prototype of what the country can look like. In South Sudan, there are 64 tribes. They are at each other's throat most of the time. But here we've got 36 young people who say, it doesn't matter which tribe are we from. We are from one Guyana. An 8-year-old boy of one of the participants, when the teacher asked him in Kenya, why do you South Sudanese always fighting? He said, I'm South Sudanese and I'm not fighting. This is not my war. And I think in South Africa, this is what we need to say as well. We are South Africans. We are not fighting. This is not our war. We can be a prototype of what this country can look like if we build the relationships and reach out to each other. As human beings. Maybe airy fairy, I don't know. What do you say, Baron?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm actually here this evening just to listen to you, Chris. I'm relaxed and I learned from you. I met you about 12 years ago, and to listen to you, what you've done since the height of apartheid in the 80s up to now, is for all of us a learning process, and especially in South Africa. We can learn from you and others on this panel here this evening, what to do, because we are now in 2003. You must learn from the past and to build a new future. I returned from Rwanda a week ago, and I don't want to talk about the politics of Rwanda. That's a different story, but things there are working. People look happy. The infrastructure is working. The roads are beautiful. There's clean water and sanitation. The crime rate almost 0%. And they came through a very difficult time in 1994 with the genocide, and that's just an example of one place that really it was terrible. And how they changed it over the last 29 years. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the people here, Chris, you and others, and Trader and Laurie, I know, and Charles, that we have still a role to play in South Africa. We haven't, that road that all of us, and you specifically, Chris, was not for nothing. It is to play a role in 2003. And we as older people have a very important role to play, and to give hope. You talked about hope, that we must give hope to the younger people. So to convince people there's a future in South Africa, and I believe there's a future. South Africa is no different from other countries. Every country has its own challenges. And the same principles of dialogue must apply here. And I have hope. I'm actually surprised that we are going, actually, we are on a road to improve. I believe that. And because people are standing up at the moment and they realize that, listen, if we are not going to talk to each other, listen to each other, put ourselves in other people's shoes, we are not going to have a future. But there's not a way that I see it. And my experience, I experienced it that people realize that South Africa is a wonderful country. And the people are wonderful people. The best in the world. I don't want to go anywhere in the world. I want to stay here. And therefore, we can use this, and dialogue is the most important thing. You know, everything else comes from dialogue. You can't go over to action if you don't understand people, if you don't realize that, listen, we are a diverse country, diverse in so many aspects, you know, different cultural histories and customs and so on. But that makes us a very interesting nation. And we must build on that, use that diversity to get unity. And I have a lot of confidence that we are going to a brighter future.
Thank you, Barend. Cannot agree with you more. And if I think about courage to do something, you are near the top of my list of the courage that you have displayed over many years. Can I just tell a little bit about how I shifted focus from being an active dialogue trainer and a mediator to the establishment of On the Yoke Foundation, and then end my conversation with a challenge to all of us? Okay. It's maybe not relevant to all of us on this platform, but maybe it is. I have just discovered that there is a peace industry in this world. And there are some darlings of this peace industry, especially international NGOs, mostly based in Brussels or Switzerland or the US, who are very close to the pockets of money. And they get all the jobs. They have lots of euros and dollars. They do training courses all over the world. And that a conversation that I had with Bishop Taban of South Sudan way back in 1990 stayed with me, and I'm linking these two now, the conversation with Bishop Taban and this peace industry. Bishop Taban is also our patron, a fantastic person. He wrote a book, Peace Deserves a Chance. He's the Bishop Tutu of South Sudan. So Bishop Taban and I met at a conference in Washington, and he looks at me and he asked me, so what do you do? And I tell him I'm working in peace building. And he said to me, are you also one of these peace vultures? I said, what do you mean, peace vulture? He says, yeah, I know you guys. You are flying like vultures across the world. Then you see a fight, a carcass, and you go down and you feast and you eat. And when there are only dry bones left, you take off. And then it's Myanmar, and then it is Ethiopia, and then it is another country. So the point that he was making is that there is a peace industry of consultants and international people. I was part of that make their money and leave no capacity on the ground and just feast on other people's conflicts. That stayed with me over the years, and I just began to think, this is not sustainable, and it's not right. I'm earning a living because of other people's conflicts. I'm being paid to do that. I mean, I remember one of the conversations that I had with Lawrence when I came to Guyana. I'm not going to go into personal details, but as an expat in Guyana, I earned much more than local program managers of the UN in Guyana, just because of the fact that I'm an expat. So I sat one day in a meeting in Nepal of where UN agencies were talking about how to support Nepal. And to my shock, I discovered that the different UN agencies are competing with each other to get funds for the same kind of projects, and they are duplicating the dialogue work, the capacity building work, training work, and all of them just go to the same pot. They do exactly the same thing, and it's a scramble like vultures around a carcass to see who can get the most fat. And you talk to the people who are implementing these programs, and you discover they are exhausted. They don't agree with it, but they are paid to do it. And as soon as they begin to show some progress, the donor country decides to move to a different focus area, and then the project stops. That's the one category. The other category are people who are not paid. NGO people who are working for next to nothing, who are spending day and night literally trying to build peace in their own communities, not getting remunerated, and then their processes get hijacked by other dynamics. I remember so well one Pakistani, Afghan-Pakistan on the border. I once worked with in a workshop in Sweden, and he was telling me how the local people, local police, and local community leaders came up with, over a couple of months, a program to stop the violence in that region. And the next thing, these guys were plucked from that situation, flown to Geneva in a wonderful conference venue because some donor country had a lot of money, and the peace plan was being discussed in Switzerland. And these guys were sitting and they say, what was it all about? And don't we matter on the ground? So I started talking to people. What would serve you as peace builders? What is it that would, what is it that would make you feel valued and supported? You know what they came up with, which was surprising, but also not that surprising. They said, I want time out and time to reflect and think with peers. And it was at a time where I also worked in Myanmar, and the people in Myanmar plow with oxen. And they had these oxen with the yokes on their necks. And then I thought to myself, these oxen who work on the fields the whole day, they come home in the evenings and then they get unyoked. The yoke gets taken off. They get food, they get water, they get rest. And then the next day they can go and work again. So a colleague of mine, Nomfundo Walaza, and I discussed this with John Paul Lederock, the person that I told you about. We said to him, we think what peace builders are requesting of us is time to unyoke. And so we formed the Unyoke Foundation. And for the first 3-4 years, we organized retreats for people who are working in conflict. Always more women than men, about 60% overseas, 40% South African. Not more than 10, 12 people in Volmut, Hermanus. Beautiful venue. Good food, good wine, enough rest, walks in the mountain, walk along the seaside, writing, poetry, art for a whole week. Nothing is expected of them, just to share with others what they feel important to be shared with others. And we are so surprised to see the impact of that. I mean, one person said, this is very simple, but highly efficient. And we still can't really understand why it is so inspiring. I mean, Joe, you were there, and we've had about 85 people already who have attended these retreats. And so people come into a space as strangers. And within 1 week, they leave that space, they walk 6 feet tall, they feel unyoked. Somebody listens, somebody understands, their peers who are in the same position or even worse situations have cheered them up and have really given them a space where they could support each other. It's just brilliant. So Unyoke Foundation is up and running. I stepped aside from being executive director and decision making, and young people are now leading it, and James are accompanying us on that journey. So this is an open invitation also to those of you who feel you need some time to unyoke and to be with others who are working for in difficult circumstances. We don't only restrict it to peace builders. We're talking about people that want to make a difference, because we're taking well-being seriously. There's no joy in burnout, and there's no joy in fading away because you've burnt yourself like a candle, and in the end there's nothing. So if we can make a contribution to help peace builders walk tall and go back with new energy, that's the one thing. And the other thing is that we're very proud of is we are beginning to influence the way the philanthropic community is supporting peace building. Our main donor, Humanity United, must give credit to them. They have stuck with us. They have changed. They are inspiring other donors to also do peace building differently. And slowly but surely, I think we are reaching a point, or we are working towards a point where people understand the value of self-care, of group care, and of supporting one another. So let me end with this challenge. Those of us who are in this field, can you commit to support young people to take the baton from us, the baton? How do you pronounce this word? Can you commit to paying it forward? If you are paid to do conflict resolution work, can you invest in the next you, or in a cause where people are actually inspired to take up the baton from where we are currently? I'm almost 70 years old. I don't have much longer to learn, but I'm so grateful to see how, if younger people are taking the space, not given the space, when they are taking the space. And Joe, you were talking about mistakes. I'm seeing how the younger people who are leading on Yoke Foundation are taking much wiser and better decisions than what I would have taken. And so there comes a point where we need to get out of the way and invest in others around us. So on that note, Laurie, I think that concludes about 15% of what I wanted to share, but that's enough, I think.
Chris, thank you so much for all the sharing. It was very, very informative, and we will definitely invite you back. We want to know more. We want to learn more. What a wonderful lesson, says Santi Himan. Thank you, Chris. I fully agree with her. Maybe any final words from our international participants tonight? You're welcome. Okay, any final words from South African participants? Maybe giving the action guys the first opportunity, dialogue in action.
Yes, thanks. Yes, I think we're a network. If you've heard Dialogue for Action, we're a few, Barnes and I, and then Laurie, Chris, several, and Charles also. So, in case you're interested, we're building a group, a network, not another foundation, not another formal NGO, but a network where people can know what other people are doing and see are there ways that they could support that. So I think, Laurie, we'll connect with your email address. We're still building the way we're going to manage that network and connect. But so you're the kind of people we'd like to also be part of the network so that we can learn from you and you can get excited about some of the things that people in our network are doing. So that's one thing. And then maybe I shall just mention, it's the first time that I've really heard Chris speak about how he works. I was fascinated to see the synergy or kind of almost resonance with the work that we do in Cinovation. And on the 28th of September, my daughter, who lives in Perth, and I are going to do a similar session. So that's 2 weeks from now, and with a much kind of very practical tools. But I was fascinated about the resonance between your approach and some of the things that we do. So people might just know that that's coming up in 2 weeks.
Thank you for that, Trader. Maybe a final word from Barend tonight.
Thank you, Laurie, for the opportunity. I really enjoyed tonight's session, and thank you, Chris, and for the other. Yeah, you know, it is so important that we work together. You know, that we come, especially in South Africa, that we see it as especially with the election next year, and many people have lost hope. And I believe that that if we can come together, more and more people, that we are going to go into a new phase in South Africa. There is a lot of hope. And if I hear what happened, Chris, with your whole story, and then I have hope for South Africa. If you talked about, you know, the mid-80s up to now, then we can say, listen, there's also hope for South Africa. And yes, the young people must take over. You know, I also turned 70 2 months ago, and but we must never underestimate the role that we are still playing. You know, they must take over, and it's so wonderful to see young people actively involved in all these kind of activities. So it gives me hope, because that is the future. You know. Because the only reason why we are still busy, actively involved in these kind of dialogue, interaction, and so on, is because of our children and our grandchildren. That's the legacy that we want to leave behind, and it's our privilege. Thank you very much, Laurie, and thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you so much, Barend.
Laurie, forgive me for just adding one more thing. I'm seeing Kala Sigopol on the call as well, also from Guyana. She and Rolinda are still working together. And I just want to tell Kala that I'm still using what you have taught me in Guyana. Kala is part of the Baha'i faith. And she explained to us that when the Baha'i people need to make a decision, Kala, you need to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how I remember it. If they want to take a difficult decision and they pray about it, then people are invited to put their best idea forward as to how to solve the situation. But then this is the golden rule. Once you put your idea forward, that idea is no longer yours. It becomes the group's idea. So if your idea is rejected, you don't need to feel bad. if your idea is accepted, you don't need to take the credit for it. It becomes a group idea. I thought this was just brilliant. Carla, did I hear you correctly?
Correct, correct. And we often use the example of a bow and arrow. Once you let go the arrow, you don't own it anymore. You know, your idea is gone, and it, you know, it mingles with, because we say from the spark of many ideas, yeah, then you get the, you know, the best of the choice, no? We use the process, we call it consultation. And there are, of course, prerequisites for consultation, and it's a lot of what you're saying, you know, coming with the pure intention, willing to listen without, you know, judging, seeing what is best for everyone. There's no personal intent. There are many of those requirements that we work on individually. So when we come together for consultation, we are better prepared. It's yeah, it's your being, as we would say. The more you be, the more you do. So it goes together, the being and the doing. One reinforces the other.
So there's a reason. Oh, wonderful. So there's a reason why we're called human beings and not human doings, right?
Correct. But the doing is also important, because that helps your being.
Yeah.
We can't just be. It takes, you know, it's not enough. We have to be and we have to do. So the being and the doing together transforms self and community. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Carla.
you. Chris, I mean, Rolinda already said, you know, as you were talking, I was writing down and ticking, yes, we do this, we do this. You've been such a great mentor that Rolinda and I work exactly as you said, with the diversity. I mean, there's no gender balance, but in Guyana, the race balance is so important. And I think because I am Indian and Rolinda is, you know, Afro-Guyanese, when we do things together, you know, people can take what we say rather than interpret, you know, who we are in terms of race lens. And I think that's one of the most powerful access that we have to reach people, because we do it together and we are good friends and we, you know, work together, and people can see that this is possible. So we take away the race hatred from the equation, so to speak, you know. And I think that is so important, and gender and age is the other kind of barriers that we need to pull down, so people are better able to accept what you're saying or listen to what you're saying, because sometimes these physical barriers come in the way of hearing what we are saying. So I really like the idea of working as a team, and a team that is as diverse as possible. I think that's so important for the work that we are doing, because no matter how lofty our what we are saying, it may not be, you know, conducive for the listener because they are struggling with your own barriers, you know. So we also have to kind of make it easier to tear down those barriers. So yeah, I really like the discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well
Really
done. Well
appreciate
said.
you. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got 6 minutes before it's candle time on this side. I really thank everyone for joining and participating. It was really great listening to you, Chris, and learning from all the others on the platform. And we hope to have you back soon. Thank you so much. May you have a great evening. Please stay in touch. My own contact details is laurie@socialjustice.co.za. You're more than welcome to speak to me. The recording will also be available later, so please stay in touch. Thank you, everyone. May you have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.